Been a good while since Project Rubi-Ka has been heard from, so I would figure to do a update video on what has happened since the closure in the end of November. If you are unfamiliar with what Project Rubi-Ka is, it is a emulation project designed to preserve Anarchy Online since it is in its twilight years right now, and will likely not last much longer, although that is a subject of debate. If you are out of the loop, to catch you up to speed, what happened in November, the servers closed for Ithaca, Project Rubi-Ka's public server, and the reason behind this was to put the kibosh on possible exploiting, cheating, generally getting around the rules, things that the developers did not appreciate, as well as working on some pretty big systems for the game. I know I've seen the developers talking in the Discord about working on the mission system for the game, and that's a pretty big ask. I don't think it's something they want to put out by piecemeal. To get into the meat of the video, I want to talk about the announced weapons for the upcoming Season 2, is what the developers have called it, and their stats and where they fit into the game right now. Most of what I'll be sharing for this section will be already public information just on their Discord, the Project Rubi-Ka Discord. I'll be showing all of what they've done, especially their videos, because I didn't really want to step on their thunder. But I will be showing the stat tables of what's available. So first on the list we have the B19 modified breathing space. And if you are familiar with the Temple of the Three Winds, you might know of a certain Reverend, I believe it is Reverend Hyuand, the one in close to where the Guardian of Tomorrow is. He usually drops a weapon similar to this that is much weaker. So looking at the stats here on the requirements, you see very quickly that this looks familiar to what the Howling Skulls, the Phase Blades are about at, and it does a little bit more damage, and it's a little bit slower. You also see that it uses melee energy instead of normal melee weapon types. You'll see the common theme behind all these new weapons is their weapon types that are generally underutilized. Anyway, we keep looking here, we see sneak attack, which is a little bit weird, since I thought melee energy was generally something for keepers, enforcers, generally not the sneaky types, but it's on there. I guess it could be used for PvP, although how much PvP is going to be on Project Rubi-Ka? The only other thing I'd like to talk about here is the defense skills. It checks duck explosions, which is more desirable for PvP since it's less likely that people will raise duck explosions compared to the other evade skills. And the multi-melee check, which is a requirement to put it in your offhand, while it isn't super high, it is somewhat higher than the other Temple of the Three Winds options. I think the Howling Skulls are just a little over 100, while the Phase Blades are about 150, 130, somewhere in there. And it does seem to about fit, because it does more damage than those options. And it's still rather low. And then we get to the proc, which is a 10% chance to proc a damage over time, a dot. Switching to the stats of the dot program here, you can see it is very powerful for what it is. It does 50 damage over 9 hits with a 3-second delay, which puts it around 450 damage on top of what you're already doing. So this makes the weapon, I think, basically peerless in its requirement category. I cannot, to my knowledge, I do not know of any other weapons in melee energy that are close to this at this level range that are also available on Project Rubi-Ka. You gotta remember, there is no Alien expansion, there is no Lost Eden, there is no Legacy of the Zan, and the Shadowlands itself is somewhat limited. So you have a pretty limited selection to pick from, and this really stands out. Next on the list we have the Shadow Fade rifle. This one is in the naming with the Shadow Fade armor set, so I would assume that it would drop from the same mobs that drop the armor set in the Temple of the Three Winds. Looking at the stats here, you'll see it has a very good damage with a pretty low bar to entry, with pretty fast speeds for a rifle as well, and a pretty big magazine. So overall, a pretty strong competitor in the rifle market. The one piece missing here is the profession lock. Since almost all rifle users are agents, the most popular rifle is the caterwaul, the caterwaul, but that also kinda shoehorns them into being the only good rifle user, and this will expand the options that other professions have. I believe the current other competitor rifle is the Yatamuchi rifle, the X3 counter sniper rifle, which isn't anywhere close to this as far as a damage for Rex. The only other observation here is that it uses fling shot and snipe. Snipe is pretty common in all rifles. Fling shot is not so common. It's a nice thing to have sometimes, but if you're not planning on using a fling shot rifle in the late game, then it may force you to put points into something you don't want to do. Now for the proc, I know there's no description here, and I don't have a stat sheet for it or stat table, but the developers revealed that the effect was a blind, something that reduces the add-all offense of your opponent, which causes them to hit you less often, which is not amazing. It's not like the B19 where it adds so much damage, especially because this is a rifle and you're going to be hitting them less often, so it's not going to proc as often. I think this overall makes for a decent rifle. I think agents will use this instead of a caterwaul at certain points. Maybe at the tail end of the subway if they're doing a little bit of twinking, or early on to maybe about 50 to 60, maybe in the Temple of the Three Winds. But agents have access to a lot of twinking tools, so getting a high level caterwaul in the Temple of the Three Winds is pretty doable. So it's not quite as a standout as the B19. So something a little different here. We have an item, and it is a item that you equip. It is a HUD slot a heads-up display, and it functions similar to what a scope would do. These requirements would place it roughly around the end of the subway, the beginning of Temple Three Winds, around level 25 to 30. And there's not a whole lot else known about this item, at least that is publicly available. It was confirmed by the developers that it is a craftable scope, but that's about it. These requirements are pretty easy. I think just about any profession can do it, given with a little bit of time, a little bit of implanting. Pharmatech is a little weird, but it's not undoable. Now the real draw here, the critical increase 15, this is really big. For most classes, you don't really get a whole lot of options as far as criticals. Martial artists get a critical buff line, agents get a critical buff line, and that's pretty much it. I think bureaucrats have a little bit of critical buffing they can do, but it's not substantial, and there's a couple of other scopes in the game, a couple plus ones here and there that you can get, but it doesn't really add up to much. So this is a big get for crit builds, but the drawback here, every single one of your combat stats is minus 4,000, except for rifle and shotgun. So you have to use one of those two weapons. So, Cries from the Ether. This is another one from the Temple of the Three Winds. I would imagine it would drop from either a cultist wielding the shotgun, or maybe one of the higher ups in there, like an alkalite with the shotgun, or something along those lines. I don't imagine this would drop from a boss, at least not any of the major bosses, maybe Defender of the Three. Now these basic stats and requirements would put it roughly in line with the Maw of the Abyss from the Inner Sanctum, where it's bigger damage and less focused on crits, which is more appealing in this point in the game, since you don't have a lot of options for crits. The primary competition here would be a pump master or a pump trainee, probably a pump master in this case, and it still, I think, would significantly outperform a pump master. The damage min and the just very slow attack speed of the pump master, it wouldn't be able to keep up with this. But this does take about 130 more shotgun skill to use, which, considering we won't be super buffed out of our minds on Project Rubi-Ka, that will actually mean something for a trader, so I think it'll still leave an opening for the pump master. The other big player in the shotgun game would be the home defender, which is more crit focused than this is, so I think they fill different niches here. I almost forgot the Mudder Lugu, which is a shotgun from the Shadowlands. It is trader only, but it focuses more on damage, but it is very slow. So there's some trade-offs here, and I think the Cries from the Ether would generally outperform it in its competitive range. Now we keep scrolling. We see it just got Fling Shot, which is what you'd expect, seeing the requirements. And it checks Duck Explosion, which is another, that's what you'd think you'd get from a shotgun. And the modifiers are a little bit different. The healing efficiency bonus is a little bit strange. I think it's supposed to be for doctors, or I guess traders also have a healing line as well, which gives you a little boost in that regard. and it does cold AC, which can be good or bad. It's harder to buff like plus cold AC damage, but most mobs or players don't focus cold AC as much. This shotgun is definitely a standout in its level range, and when paired with the scope, similar to the Shadow Fade rifle, it would make it even stronger. The Bow of the Forsaken Reveries was added to the Steps of Madness pool, and it's hard to say who it drops from. There's a handful of little side bosses who all already drop weapons, and of course there's Nelib, who drops the big rod, but I'm not sure. It could also just drop from a random enemy as well. Now the stats pretty much outclass any other bow in the game at this level. It's just better than everything else. Its primary competitor would be the Bow of Ferocious Appetite, and that's still not even close. Now for the big stuff here. It uses Fling Shot and Snipe, which is typical for bows. It's not out of the question. It uses ranged weapons initiative instead of physical initiative, which I've seen as a common trend among higher end bows, higher level bows. They generally lean into ranged initiative more. And the proc, which was confirmed to be a extra nuke. I think it's cold AC, like the bow itself. And I would imagine it would do somewhere around the lines of the Director Pistol, about 300 damage-ish. This bow, on top of being a clear standout, also signals a change from the developers about bow special attack. While this doesn't use the bow special attack skill, it will feature arrows alongside it that are craftable, and I think they would be used as like a on-use item, such as like the gum boils or the rings in the Temple of Three Winds. There's a lot of these arrow effects, so I'm gonna scroll through them pretty quickly since it's kind of a niche mark anyway. There is a arrow effect with a blind, an arrow with a AoE nuke, an arrow with a short root, an arrow with a healing and nano point drain, and an arrow that casts a dot and a fear at the same time. Now there's a lot of stuff going on with those arrows, and you can take a look in the video and pause it and see more specifics, but they're all in the same cooldown, so you can't just use one after the other and stack a bunch of damage. And I think the whole goal behind it is to make bows a more attractive option since they're kind of sidelined right now. Another one for the Temple of the Three Winds pool is Kalim's Reliance. This one pretty obviously drops from Kalim, the second form of the final boss. A close-up on the stats here. It does a pretty hefty amount of damage for a weapon in the Temple of Three Winds. It's a little bit lower in the ballpark range of the Stygian Desolator, and it uses ranged energy as its primary attack skill. It's a little bit on the slower side, about 4 seconds. This weapon uses burst and full auto as its specials, which is generally good, I would think. Ranged energy doesn't have a very good set in stone option, so you kind of just take what you can get. It also checks duck explosions, which is kind of uncommon for a non-shotgun. Not much else to see here. The only class I can really see getting a hold of this weapon would be a soldier. The big issue with ranged energy is that it conflicts with a lot of head implant slots. And there's also not a lot of good options. There is a weapon in the Shadowlands, I think it's called Destruction, that's okay. It's like a radiant weapon. And there's a few profession locked Dyna weapons that drop. And on live there is Scott's, which is like a boss drop, a high level weapon. But other than that, there's not any options really, so just having a option makes this a good weapon in its category. This one, I think people are looking forward to more, the Arm of the Disciple. It is a pistol that drops in the Temple of Three Winds from something. Don't know what it would be. It would either be the Pistol Cultists or off of just a regular named mob. I think this one is a little bit harder to recommend as the clear standout option, since there is a lot more competitors in the pistol field. You have the Tinker pistol, you have all of the adventure locked pistols if you're an adventurer, you have the SOL pistols are really good. BBIs can also work in a pinch. So there's plenty of good options in the field. It's just they're not like, there's no one clear standout. Now the stats here, the requirements are pretty similar to that of the Howling Skulls, the Phase Blades, roughly in that ballpark. And the damage is a little bit higher, it's a little bit slower. Crit's also pretty high as well for a pistol. So it balances out, I think. Now to look downwards, you see it's got burst and fling shot, which fling shot comes about on every pistol. Burst is not quite as common. I think you see that on the SOL machine pistols and the customized Desert Reats, the Foreman's pistol. Oh no, I think this weapon will be a accessibility thing more than the best weapon. The customized Desert Reats, while they're very powerful, they also require you killing the final boss of the Foreman's. He's about level 100-ish, and he's very difficult to solo. As well, the SOL pistols are not easily obtainable. You have to kill Dyna bosses for them, and the loot pools, I'm not sure, are 100% accurate on Project Rubi-Ka. At the very least, I'd never seen a SOL pistol drop in Season 1. So this should give all the typical pistol classes a decent option that's pretty easy to get. So we got a big ol' hammer. The Absolution Hammer. This one's being added to the Temple of Three Winds pool. I'm guessing the same as the other Temple of Three Winds weapons that aren't really identified where they drop. It's either from cultists or maybe named mob. Looks like it's a competitor to the Energy Scythe, and honestly, it looks a little bit stronger than the Energy Scythe. Although they are different damage types, so you gotta keep that in mind. The other major competitors would be the Icebreaker, which would be a lower level Dyna drop, and Neleb's Rod, which is somewhat a little bit higher than this. It does more damage and has a proc attached to it. There's not much else going on in this part. It doesn't list Brawl or Dimac as a special, but I believe they are available for their appropriate classes. I think Brawl should be available for everybody. It does list Duck Explosions as a defense skill, which I'm not sure is correct. I don't know, maybe the idea is the hammer causes an explosion on impact or something, but I think that might be changed later on. So, this hammer, I think, fits the same role that the Arm of the Disciple does, where it's designed to be an accessible option against the more powerful boss drops. In this case, it is Neleb's Rod. I could definitely see an Enforcer using this. I think that's the intended class. I could also possibly see metaphysicists and doctors. Doctors get the Neleb's Rod later, and with that they get the Nano Drain on hit. Metaphysicists, they path into Howlets, so they have an endgame option after this. Coming down a little bit in level, you have the Overcharged Nova Flow for not the regular one that you normally would buy. I think on live you just buy it in the weapons store. On Project Rubi-Ka you would buy it in the trader shop. The Vanilla Nova Flow is an assault rifle with a small range energy requirement. This one is fully ranged energy and is more damage focused and less crit reliant. According to the developers, it will drop in the subway from who? I don't know. I think it would likely be too early if it were to drop from the Strike Foreman, and I think Abomineth would be too hard. So I think Virgil might be an option, Unenemies might be an option. It could be on the Blood Creeper, and it may just be in the general loot pool as well. Now these stats, if you've played recently, you might be familiar with the illegally modified weapons that drop in the subway. And I thought this looked very similar to the OFAB Shark, which is the assault rifle variant, but I was informed that there was differences, and I can see there are some, like this doesn't have full auto and its attack is somewhat slower, but I think they're still somewhere in the same ballpark at least. This might not carry you quite as long in the Temple of Three Winds. There's not a whole lot else going on with this gun. It has a burst special. That's about it. So this one marks another standout because if there's no competition. I think the primary users of this gun would be soldiers, traders, and fixers. There's not much else to say. The last item I'm going to be doing in this video is the prototype energy katana. This one was announced about 3.5 weeks ago as of this recording, and I don't think there will be a whole lot more additions, at least as far as item additions. And if there are more, I'll either make a separate video or I'll add them on to the Season 2 release video. Like the Nova Flow, this one was said to be in the subway, and it doesn't really have a whole lot of direct competition. As far as the drop, it's the same deal with the Nova Flow. They're roughly about the same requirements, so One of the subway bosses, likely. The stats are pretty overall good, is what you'd expect. The only real standout is the min damage is pretty high for a Rubi-Ka weapon. It uses fast attack, and according to the developers, if you were a keeper, you can use Dymac with it. There's not much else here to say. It makes a decent overall weapon in the early game, and it gives you something to approach the breathing space, the B19. It's up 3 wins. That's all I got for announced new items to the game. And they have a pretty good lineup of things that I think people will be excited to try out, try new builds. Personally, I've talked about this in the Discord. I want to try a martial artist that uses shotguns, and to this end, I will need the new crit scope. So that means I will be locked into using shotguns. As far as shotguns go, the Cries from the Ether looks like a pretty tasty shotgun. The Home Defender is also a pretty likely option. I've thought about using a certain other shotguns, like the ultra-light raid pistol, but as it was revealed to me by, I believe it was Stormlash, the ultralight raid pistol and also the Diamondine kick pistol both use pistol, is in their name, and the scope lowers your pistol by 4,000, so those options kind of go out the window. So I'm probably going to be locked into Home Defenders, maybe a Krut Assault, or I think Ithaca's, or Ithaca's might be a shotgun, or a shotgun pistol. Generally high crit reliant weapons. And I think the plus 15 plus the martial artist only crit buff will make things go off. It will be able to offset the lack of primary attack skill, since martial artists don't get a whole lot of shotgun buffs. The only way I'll be able to really increase my shotgun skill is through implants. Maybe if I had some Mai's ranged armor, that could also work. And I think this will be interesting at the very least. It might not be very successful, or it may be too successful, and they'll get nerfed. But either way, it should be pretty entertaining. My other plans, I could do another metaphysicist if I really wanted to, but I've done it a couple times at this point. And I will likely make a trader. I might not record it at all, just get them to 25 and then use them as a specialist trading mule. As far as breed, I am somewhat conflicted because I've run Aatroxes all the time in the past to all of my characters, pretty much. Well, not all of them. Most of my characters that I played on camera on Project Rubi-Ka were Aatroxes. I had a keeper who was a Solitus that I played pretty much offline. My trader was a Opifex, I believe. And those are my two primary choices, I think, for this martial artist is Aatrox and Opifex. And I am unsure which one to pick. With the Aatrox, you obviously get the big HP buff. I think you get the trickle down for shotgun skill, which could be useful. With Opifex, you get the chance for more evades. Martial artists kind of lean into evades. They have evade buffs. So there's both pros and cons there. That's all I've planned for Season 2 on my own so far. This is a spoiler warning. If you continue watching this video, you will likely be spoiled on information that has not been officially revealed yet. Alright, you have enough time to click away now. I'm gonna get into the part of the video where I start viewing the Project Rubi-Ka RDB, the version of the game that was last updated around November 23rd, November 25th, roughly around there. Alright, we're in the SQL viewer here. And I am no professional when it comes to this sort of stuff. I mostly work with MongoDB, so this is mostly foreign to me. I guess I can look at these tables here. Or maybe this is the database structure. I want to go to browse data, I think. Okay, I was just being really silly. You have to scroll over the binary and then it tells you, I guess, a more human readable translation. You can see there it says house template. Needed PR stuff, PF stuff. Oh, playfield stuff, yeah. Default door links, monster and NPC dependencies. There's a lot of stuff in here that's not very important. ACD? Newland Desert? Oh, are these playfields? Wonder what the... I think Avalon should be the lowest, isn't it? Motion FX fixes. Town template playfield. AI graphics dependencies. LE dependencies. Lost Eden. Dependencies EP1. Camelot 120. I think that's the lowest playfield number. That's trivia that you definitely need to know. Tur Assembly Hall. Smugglers. Rearranged. Condemned Subway. Yeah. Subway Junction. I'm not sure what these actually represent, but there's lots of data here. And that's just the one table. And here, sometimes it makes less sense than others. Let's scroll a little faster here. I get some stuff on the bottom. Weapons data fragment. Okay, here we go. This is the item that was used for the getting the 00 sewer opens, just at the shop terminal, use them there. PRK shirt. I believe that was an item handed out by the developers sometimes. Keeper nano container. That was an item that was added because Keepers didn't have a nano program container on Newbie Island in this version. Shade, same thing. Melee weapons. Oh, at the shop terminal. Yeah. Sentient targeting goggles. Yep, that would be it. There's our scope. Once attached, the nano circuitry wires begin to move with a mind of their own. After coming as far, you've determined to see your own creation through to the end. Placing the goggles. Is there a way to... I don't know. over your eyes. The wires painfully burrow into the back of your head. Stabbing, blah, blah, blah. All alley integration's very good. You will survive. There's no actual other stats here though. Just I think it's just a description and the name. Tattered copy of Wetware. It's the poorly catered for magazine. Poorly cared for. Strange after market biomodding. Clicking in the rough pages, something. Set instructions, something attaches to your eye, like causing pain. What do you need is a targeting scope and some bright vision goggles. So it's giving me like a crafting recipe here. Once you have the instructions, something, the page is not, oh. It's covered in blood. Wait, what else would be covered in grape juice? Covered in ketchup? Okay. Targeting scope. After removing the existing lens. Targeting scope fits surprisingly well in the space left behind. You see an interconnection interface somewhat, except some kind of analyzer. Okay. Bio-analyzing. Okay, I think that would be it. Bio-targeting goggles. And something... a computer? Seemed to be simple enough. Seeing all this parts come together, you can't help but wonder why this technology fits together so seamlessly. Especially a recipe published in a underground magazine. Whilst musing on the situation, you notice a blinking coming from inside the goggles. Please insert serum. Is this gonna be the serum? Activated something. The XU11 serum into the bioanalyzer seemed to work. Okay, so the one piece I seem to be missing here in all this is this. There's like a scope. I mean, it tells you the instructions in the magazine, I guess. You need a targeting scope and night vision goggles, but there's definitely some other steps here. Seems like there's an item called the X11 serum. It's not listed here, I don't think. Yeah. Targeting scope. A targeting scope after. I guess it's just they named it the same thing. I guess. Bioanalyzing. Targeting goggles. Okay, so like the first word here is like the name of the item. There's definitely quite a few steps here. But maybe the XU11 serum is an item in the base game. Has not been added. It's the only thing I think of. I don't know. I search. Can I search the output? I don't think I can. Yeah. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I think that's everything. So, was it worth it? I don't know. But the information's out there now, I guess. I kind of know, I guess, what to look for. Kind of. I don't know. When I've talked to the developers about the scope in the past, it seems like I should have been able to find it pretty easily given time. So I'm not sure it's really going to give me much of an edge. Besides, just I know in advance roughly what to expect. There's a couple of crafting steps, and it requires buying some stuff from the shop, like some scopes and the night vision goggles or whatever. Anyway, as far as season 2, like an actual time on it, I have no idea. Maybe this year? I don't know. When the servers closed, I was hopeful for February, and that was very optimistic.